What mistake should have killed you? As teenagers we used to smoke pot in the garage in the car with it running for hours. No idea how we didn't kill everyone in the house multiple times over. Christmas Eve many years ago, and I couldn't sleep, so I took 2 sleeping pills. Was impatient, so I decided to take 2 more heavy duty allergy medication on top of the sleeping pills. Being a young naive boy, I had no idea the consequences of mixing medicine like that. That's maybe 3x the normal dosage for a 12-year-old. I felt extremely off for the following week or so. Retentioning a garage door spring and the tension tool popped out. The door crashed with enough force to crack the pavement. Edit, had no idea so many others had died doing this. Going forward would never do this again. I nearly fell into a fucking volcano leaning on a rope fence. Edit, holy shit, this comment blew up. Right, more context, I was 8 to 9 at the time, and I managed to catch myself on that same fence. After I nearly keeled over it, I never let go of stuff when I fall. This was in Italy, hence the lack of actual safety procedures. Being a young insecure boy on a motorcycle. Riding my motorcycle, like a jackass, on back roads. Thought buddy gave the signal we were going to pass a car on a double yellow. I proceeded to throw the bike into the next lane without thinking it through. Was greeted by a work truck with a utility bed on it, wider than normal truck bed. Was already ahead of my buddy, and almost next to the minivan that I thought we were going around. Decided my only option was to pin it, think skinny, and split right down the middle of the double yellow. I should be a grease stain. Had to pull over and think for a while after that one. Don't really ride on the streets much anymore because of this incident. I found the racetrack and am much happier taking my hooliganism to a closed course these days. Tubing behind a speedboat. Pulled myself too far forward. It submarined and popped up in the air. I was flung forward and got tangled in the tow rope. Playing with the laundry chute in my childhood home when I was around 5 years old. My cousins and I took turns dropping things down the chute while someone else stood at the bottom and dodged them. For the most part it was things like washcloths, stuffed animals, a clothing item, etc. Just so happened that when I stood under the chute, my cousin dropped a 5-pound dumbbell down and I, expecting something harmless, didn't get out of the way. That ended the game real quick. I now part my hair in a way that hides the bald spot scar on my head. Edit, listen, it shoots the laundry down. Also, a weight was dropped on my head. Shoot. Crossed an interstate without looking. I got hit by a grandmother doing 55. Managed to not only not die, but also not break anything. I did, however, get 1st and 2nd degree friction burns on a good portion of my right arm and 1st degree friction burns on my right leg, with further scrapes and contusions all over the place, plus a deep tissue bruise in my right leg that kept me from walking for about a week. I pretty much got scooped up by the car, and, I don't believe I'm going to say this, but basically yeeted about 100 feet down the road. Well, does pre-existence count? When my mother was pregnant with me, she went to have an abortion, but as she arrived at the doctor office he asked her something along the lines of, "Woman, what are you doing here? Go home. The revolution has begun. They are shooting people." So she went home, because it was the start of the Romanian Revolution of 89 feet. So she decided to have me after all. Wasn't a mistake per se, but a chain reaction resulted in my existence. I grew up in the Rust Belt, too many to mention. Playing in the industrial ruins, I've smoked pot inside an abandoned coal mine, slept in a beehive coke oven, jumped off barge loadouts to swim in the river, the list goes on. That I'm alive is nothing short of luck. My dad got trashed and tried to jump over the fence at Yankee Stadium with his friends. He failed and an iron spike punctured him. He remembers being rushed to the hospital and bleeding everywhere. Everyone thought he was going to die of blood loss. Didn't die, but he also made several more stupid mistakes, such as riding a motorcycle without a helmet and breaking several ribs etc. Honestly, he is still stupid, and I'm surprised he hasn't died yet. Edit, with to without. Dove into a pool and broke my neck at the C2 level. Hangman fracture it's called. I was so drunk I thought I just pulled a muscle or something, so I kept partying. There's pictures of me with a bag of frozen peas on my neck grilling, taking a shot from an ice luge, etc. all while my fucking neck was broken once the disc popped out, because I was playing chicken with someone on my shoulders in the same pool hours later. That's when I realized that maybe something was wrong. 1 emergency spinal fusion surgery, 5 days in the hospital, 3 months bedridden, medical discharge from the army, RIP that career, and I'm good as new. I totally should be dead or paralyzed. Edit, I also have a pretty gnarly x-ray showing the plate and screws. Here's a link, x-ray C2/C3 fusion, https://unga.com/aircraft. Car crash at 80 km/h. I hit a car that was going through a red light perpendicular to my direction of travel, came to a dead stop after hitting the back quarter panel/wheel of their car whilst they barrel rolled 3 times into the nature strip. I hit the windscreen with my head because I'm 6 feet 5 inches and wasn't wearing a seatbelt because I thought I was top shit. Both myself and the other driver walked away unscathed, which was the most surprising of all. I was taken to the hospital because of my collision with the windscreen, but was released shortly after some scans that came back okay. I don't know what saved me or the other driver that day, but I thought I died for several seconds after the impact and airbags went off, only to realize I was a bit dazed but generally fine, which followed with moments of disbelief and joy. I stumbled through a bush which had a 1 meter drop after it where I fell down. I landed on my back at the only place down there which didn't have a iron pole sticking out of the ground. Climbed onto one of those underpasses that allow river water to flow through when I was like 5. Got swept in the current and taken down the river. Only reason I survived is my dad saw my long hair barely under the current and jumped in to save me. I was driving a small car pulled in front of me and slammed their brakes. I couldn't stop in time. My truck wound up on top of their car. I was the only survivor of the vehicles involved. I remember organizing my room when I was 10 or so. I had a lava lamp on the verge of falling off my cabinet. I didn't notice until I heard a loud chatter on my floor. For some reason my brain thought it would be a good idea to pick up all the shards. I jabbed my foot with a huge piece of glass and passed out from the pain. Woke up in a hospital bed thinking it and realized the shard was gone from my foot, was stitched back up, and getting relieved looks from my family. Turns out when I passed out, I hit my head on the cement floor. I was living in my parents' basement and cracked my skull partially open and was bleeding profusely. I got taken to the hospital. My family thought I was dead. Edit, concrete floor, not cement. Thanks for pointing out. I fell down my friend's basement stairs when I was 8, hit my head on the concrete floor, and ended up being airlifted to a major city hospital after being knocked out and still screaming. Ended waking up a couple days later and found out I was missing a tooth, and I was told that as they were putting a breathing tube in, it knocked my tooth down my throat, which scared the docs more. But I was super happy cause I paid Malay for the first time in the game room and ate jello for meals. Turns out that I was actually in a comatose state and gradually got worse over 48 hours until I had zero brain activity for about 6 minutes. So I guess I did die, but I didn't find out from my family till afterwards, because who tells an 8 years old that they died? Not wearing a helmet while on a bicycle and stupidly turning left just as a car overtook me. Somehow I only got a neat scar through my eyebrow and some torn up kneecaps from it. But the look on my mother's face when she picked me up from the hospital, that made me realize how profoundly stupid I was that day. Edit, I did make a turn signal with my arm, but the driver apparently didn't see it. He later went over to the hospital to ask if I was okay and to apologize for hitting me. I had a very bad rebellious phase. At one point, I ran away from home for a week and hitchhiked my way across my country along with one of my friends. For context, we were both 15 to 16 at the time. One of the cars that gave us a ride happened to be two suspicious looking foreigners, older men, who spoke between themselves in Turkish and only one of them was able to address us in our native tongue. But we were too dumb to realize the red flags. It finally occurred to us when they passed up our exit and refused to let us go when we indicated their mistake. I had to basically fake it, as if my father knew where I was and that he'd be expecting me at a certain spot at a certain time, not even knowing if that would work. It did, miraculously, and they let us go in the middle of nowhere. We had to basically hitch another ride home. Boy, was I stupid. Almost drove a large truck into an idling Chinook helicopter's rotor blades. In my defense, it was dark and we couldn't use lights since we were in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq. One time when I was young and carefree, I was riding a motorcycle for maybe the second time, like 30 miles per hour, and just had some wires in my brain misfire. I was like, I wonder what would happen if I crossed my arms and held the left handlebar with my right hand, the right with my left. I'll tell you what happened. I just narrowly missed oncoming traffic and smacked right into a wall. Driving over an IED in Iraq, that battery had gone bad in the heat. If the battery was live, I wouldn't be. Edit. A lot of people are wondering how I knew that it was there when it didn't go off, so here is the answer to that. I was in a rural area. I didn't see some disturbed dirt in the dirt road that we were driving on, but my lieutenant in the passenger seat almost shit his pants because his life flashed before his eyes. He literally curled into a ball in his seat. I asked him what was up, and he said he was sure that there was something back there. We were currently escorting troop carriers to drop off a foot patrol in the middle of nowhere, so after we completed our drop off we went back on his order to check out the spot. My truck was the only one with an RF jammer, so I took the lead up to the spot my lieutenant had seen. When I say it, I thought to myself, holy fuck, how did I not see that? I was the demo guy, since we didn't have enough EOD in the area, so I went up to it, saw the pressure plate and wires, dug it up, and there was a battery with the battery acid all leaked out. They didn't bury it deep enough, and it was the middle of summer. About 130 F out. Not good for the battery. Under the battery and pressure plate was a box about the size of a footlocker filled with explosives and accelerant. If it had gone off, my whole truck would have been dust. We had to do a controlled demo since COD was busy, and after we took it out, half the road had a 5-foot deep crater in it. Also, thanks for the gold, stranger. It would have killed me if my mom didn't tell me to put on my helmet when I got into an accident with another person on a bike. Was in 7th grade and my helmet was cracked into pieces, got away with 2 scars on my forehead, and the other person had his bike destroyed. Cutting a piece of plywood on sawhorses with a skill saw that had the guard wedged up. Of course that piece of plywood broke before I was finished cutting. The saw fell and landed blade side up, still running, and I fell onto that. My arm saved my face from getting saw chucked. Rolled an ATV at night very drunk and somehow didn't break my neck. Sold mine and the quad I was fixing for my brother the next week. My doctor took me, cold turkey, off of a high dose of a corticosteroid that I had been on for several months. My nervous system went into shock within 24 hours. Taking on a plus 70 hours a week job just for the money. I hated the job, I hated my boss, and I hated myself. I could not look myself in the mirror anymore. I was this close to a heart attack, gained 60 kilograms, and could hardly sleep, but every month plus 12k on the bank account made me get up again and again. My wife said either you quit or I walk, really saved my life. Trying to climb a slippery cliff face whilst stoned, and being more preoccupied with not spilling some cheap alcohol. About 30 feet up I slipped and slid, stopping about a foot from the edge. And I spilled my alcohol. Deleted. Taking a pill from a complete stranger while alone on a beach in Thailand in the middle of the night. Instead, we made out, and he put me in a taxi to my hotel at dawn. The pill had been Ritalin. I was completely fine, just more focused, and that's how I first became suspicious I might have had. Turns out I do. 3 years old. Love miss. Find blue ones behind stove. Yum. Rat poison. My so's grandfather fell asleep at the wheel, drove over to the wrong side of the road, and crashed head on with a juggernaut truck. He died. I lived. Glad I sat in the back, on the right side. Driving from Italy to France. I was going to meet up with my husband, and should have just flown, but I wanted to bring our dog and I wanted to avoid renting a car when we got there. It was supposed to be a 12-hour drive, but once I got to Rome I realized I forgot my passport at home. I had to turn around and double back, putting me behind by 2 hours. Because of my backtracking I wasn't on the Morandi Bridge when it collapsed that day. Pissing off a cliff, wasted on Jack Daniels. My girlfriend at the time pulled me back by my sweatshirt, or that won't be it. Many years ago I owned a pub. I went upstairs to the house area to find all the lights were off. I flicked the trip switches to turn the lights back on, which they did. I then heard running water from my co-owner's fish tank in the lounge. Turns out the protein skimmer had flipped over and was spilling water over the wall socket. Instinctively, and very stupidly, went to turn off the plug, and as soon as I touched it got sent flying over the back of the sofa. Don't know how I'm still alive to this day. Carrying a toilet by myself after having painted the bathroom. Got caught up in the drop cloth and fell on the toilet smashing it, and a piece of the porcelain cut into my knee. My father was there with me and immediately took me to the hospital as the bleeding was pretty decent. The doctor told me that the piece missed an artery by 1/4 inches and that if I had been a smaller man I'd have bled out before I made it to the hospital. Being a very large man, 6 feet 2 inches and 350 pounds at the time, saved my life.